Dark waves rolled endlessly under the cold light of the moon, their rhythmic rise and fall creating a deep, almost hypnotic pulse. The USS Archerfish, a seasoned submarine, cut through the vast emptiness of the Pacific Ocean, its hull a silent sentinel beneath the waves. For the crew aboard, it was supposed to be another routine deployment, long, monotonous, and predictable. But what they saw that night would change everything. Petty Officer James "Jimmy" Reynolds had been in the Navy for over a decade. He had seen his fair share of strange things at sea. Unexplained lights in the sky, eerie sounds echoing through the depths, even the occasional ghost story passed down from the old salts in the mess hall. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for what he would witness on that fateful night. It started with a sound. A deep, bone-rattling thud vibrated through the submarine, jolting the entire crew into high alert. At first, they thought it might be a rogue wave or an underwater rock formation they hadn't detected on sonar. But when the second impact hit, harder, more deliberate, Reynolds knew something wasn't right. The Archerfish wasn't moving through an ordinary stretch of ocean. "Sonar report," barked the commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Harper. The sonar technician, Petty Officer Second Class Rodriguez, stared at his screen, his face pale under the dim red lighting of the control room. "Sir, you're gonna wanna see this." Harper leaned over, squinting at the sonar display. At first, it looked like just another large shadow moving beneath them, perhaps a school of fish or maybe even a whale. But then it moved. Fast. Too fast. Whatever it was, it dwarfed the submarine in size. A massive, shifting form, deeper than any known creature should be at that depth. It circled them, almost as if it was studying them. "Could be a false reading," Rodriguez whispered, but his voice betrayed his own disbelief. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature vanished from sonar. The ocean went silent again, but the unease in the air remained. The men exchanged nervous glances, waiting for something, anything to happen. And then the power flickered. Deep in the engine room, Chief Engineer Wallace cursed under his breath as the emergency lights kicked in. "Something's messing with our systems," he muttered. Up on deck, Reynolds had finally been given permission to surface. The captain wanted eyes on the water. As soon as the hatch opened, a blast of cold sea air greeted him. The night was eerily still, the moon casting a silver sheen over the waves. He squinted into the darkness, scanning the horizon. And then he saw it. At first, it was just a shadow, a long, monstrous shape beneath the surface, gliding silently like a ghost. Then a dorsal fin, massive and jagged, broke the waterline. Jimmy's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't a whale. This wasn't even a shark. It was something else. A movement, slow, deliberate. Then, with terrifying grace, a massive head breached the surface. Rows upon rows of serrated teeth caught the moonlight, a gaping maw that looked big enough to swallow the entire bow of the submarine. Reynolds stumbled back, his heart hammering. The stories were true. Megalodon was real, and it had found them. Reynolds couldn't move. His body screamed at him to run, to duck back into the submarine, to do anything but stand frozen on the deck. But his legs wouldn't listen. His breath came in short, panicked gasps as he stared at the impossible sight before him. The creature's enormous head hovered just above the waterline, dark eyes fixed on the submarine with an intelligence that sent a shiver down his spine. The sea around it churned, rippling outward as if even the ocean itself feared what lurked within it. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it slipped back beneath the surface. The water swallowed it whole, leaving only a disturbance in the waves. The silence that followed was suffocating. Reynolds sucked in a sharp breath and staggered backward, gripping the railing to steady himself. He turned to the open hatch and practically fell inside, his boots clanging loudly against the metal rungs as he climbed back down. His heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline surging through his veins. He barely made it into the control room before the words tumbled out of his mouth. "Sir, we have a problem." Harper, who had been standing over Rodriguez at the sonar station, turned sharply. His face was calm, but there was an edge to his voice. "Report." Reynolds ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, trying to steady himself. "It's a shark. A massive one. Bigger than anything I've ever seen. Bigger than this damn boat." He exhaled shakily. It was right there watching us. The room went still. Rodriguez glanced at Harper, waiting for a reaction. The captain didn't speak right away. Instead, he strode over to the periscope and took a slow, deliberate look outside. Whatever he saw, or didn't see, didn't bring him any comfort. He lowered the periscope and turned back to Reynolds. "Are you sure about what you saw?" Harper's voice was steady, but there was something else beneath it. Not doubt. Concern. Reynolds met his gaze. "I know what I saw, sir." Harper nodded slowly, as if making a decision in his head. Then he turned to Rodriguez. "Any sonar contact?" Rodriguez hesitated. "No, sir. It's like it disappeared." Harper didn't like that answer. Things that big don't just disappear. He drummed his fingers on the metal console, thinking, "We stay surfaced. I want every available set of eyes on that water. If that thing's out there, I want to know where it is." The order went out quickly. Crew members moved to the deck, scanning the ocean with binoculars, their radios crackling with tense voices. The usual banter and easygoing attitude of the sailors was gone, replaced by an uneasy silence. No one wanted to admit it, but they were afraid. Reynolds stayed near the hatch, unable to shake the image from his mind. He had seen sharks before, plenty of them. But this was something different, something ancient, something that had no business being here in this time in these waters. Wallace, the chief engineer, came up beside him, arms crossed. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Reynolds let out a humorless chuckle. "Might as well have." He glanced at Wallace. "Ever hear stories about something like this?" Wallace rubbed his chin. "I've heard all kinds of things, but nothing like a living megalodon. Plenty of weird stuff happens at sea, though. Strange disappearances, ships vanishing without a trace, sonar contacts that don't make sense. Maybe this is one of those things we weren't meant to see." Reynolds didn't like that answer. Hours passed, and the ocean remained still. Too still. It was the kind of quiet that made men nervous, the kind that felt unnatural. Then, out of nowhere, the submarine jolted violently. Sailors were thrown off balance, some hitting the deck hard. Rodriguez shouted from his station. "Contact! Large object approaching fast, directly beneath us." Harper's face darkened. "Depth! 60 feet and closing." The submarine lurched again, metal groaning under an unseen force. The lights flickered, and for a split second, there was nothing but darkness. Then the backup power kicked in, casting an eerie red glow over the control room. Reynolds grabbed onto the nearest console, trying to steady himself. "It's ramming us," he breathed. Harper didn't hesitate. "Engines full ahead. Get us moving." The submarine roared to life, but it was like trying to outrun a hurricane. Something massive moved beneath them, keeping pace with impossible ease. The sonar screen flared to life, showing a shape so large it nearly took up the entire display. "Jesus!" Rodriguez whispered. "It's bigger than we thought." Then, without warning, the creature veered off. The ocean went still again, but no one felt any relief. Harper turned to Reynolds. "Get below deck. See if we took any damage." Reynolds nodded and moved quickly, his pulse still hammering in his ears. He knew deep down that this wasn't over. The submarine was in its waters now. And the Megalodon wasn't done with them yet. Reynolds moved through the tight corridors of the submarine, his boots echoing against the metal floors. Every inch of the vessel felt smaller, more fragile, now that he knew what was lurking outside. The engineers were already assessing the situation, their voices low but urgent. Wallace stood near one of the bulkheads, running a hand over a thick dent in the metal. "That's not from a rock," Wallace muttered, shaking his head. That thing hit us hard. Reynolds swallowed. The submarine was built to withstand deep pressure, but nothing about this situation felt normal. He knelt next to one of the other engineers, Petty Officer Calloway, who was scanning for leaks. "How bad is it?" Reynolds asked. Calloway didn't answer right away. He adjusted the valve on a pressure gauge before finally speaking. "We got lucky. No breaches yet." His eyes flicked up to Reynolds. "But if that thing hits us again..." A deep, distant boom cut him off. The hull vibrated, the sound traveling through the metal like a warning. Reynolds shot Wallace a look. "What the hell was that?" Wallace exhaled sharply. "I think it's still out there." They didn't have to wait long for confirmation. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the intercom. "Bridge to engineering, we've got movement. It's circling back." Reynolds felt his stomach tighten. He grabbed the intercom receiver. "How far?" Rodriguez's voice was tense. "Too damn close." Reynolds stood up fast. "We need to get topside." Wallace gave him a sharp nod, already moving. Together they made their way back up, weaving through the narrow passageways. The submarine jolted again, but this time it wasn't a direct hit, more like a warning nudge. The creature was toying with them. By the time they reached the bridge, Harper was already there, gripping the railing so tightly his knuckles were white. The low hum of tension filled the air. "Sonar still tracking it?" Reynolds asked, stepping beside Rodriguez. Rodriguez didn't look away from the screen. "It's moving slow, almost like it's waiting for something." Harper exhaled through his nose. "That's what I'm afraid of." He turned to Reynolds. "Tell me exactly what you saw up there earlier." "Everything." Reynolds ran a hand over his face, trying to collect his thoughts. "It was massive. Bigger than anything I've ever seen. The head alone." He shook his head. "Sir, this isn't just a big shark. This thing, it watched us. Knew we were here. And now it's messing with us." Harper's jaw tightened. He wasn't the kind of man to scare easily, but even he couldn't ignore the reality of their situation. Then something changed. The sonar let out a sharp ping. The creature was moving. Rest. Rodriguez's hands flew across the controls. "Sir, it's diving 200 feet, 300. He hesitated, his eyes widening. "It's below us." For a long second no one spoke. Reynolds felt the air grow heavy. "Why would it go beneath us?" Wallace cursed under his breath. "Maybe it's trying to." Another impact, but this time it came from below. The submarine lurched violently, throwing men against consoles. The emergency alarms blared, red lights flashing across the room. "Damage report," Harper shouted. Rodriguez was already scanning. "Structural integrity holding, but if it hits us again..." Did. A second, more brutal impact sent another shockwave through the vessel. This wasn't random. This was strategy. Reynolds pushed himself up, grabbing onto a console to steady himself. "Sir, we need to surface. Now." Harper hesitated only a second before nodding. "Blow the ballast tanks. Get us up." The crew scrambled into action. Within moments, the submarine began its ascent, air rushing through the pipes as it fought its way toward the surface. Reynolds gritted his teeth, watching the depth gauge. The numbers climbed steadily. 90 feet, 70, 50. Then something changed. The submarine stopped moving. Silence. Reynolds' breath hitched. "Why aren't we surfacing?" Wallace checked the controls, his face darkening. "Something's wrong." Then came the realization. The submarine wasn't moving because something was holding it down. A chill ran through the crew as the awful truth sank in. The Megalodon had them. The submarine groaned under the immense pressure. The metal hull creaked, an eerie stretching sound that sent chills down every man's spine. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Reynolds felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He shot a glance at Wallace, who was furiously checking the systems. "We should be moving," Wallace muttered, his voice laced with unease. "But we're not." Rodriguez's sonar screen flickered. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the controls. "Sir." His voice came out strained. The contact is beneath us. It's holding us down." No one spoke. Harper clenched his jaw, his fingers curling around the console. "That's impossible." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. Nothing about this situation had been possible. Yet here they were. Reynolds swallowed hard, forcing himself to breathe. "Can we shake it loose? Full propulsion, emergency ballast dump, anything?" Wallace hesitated, then shook his head. "We could try, but if we push too hard and something snaps..." His words trailed off, but everyone understood. If the hull cracked at this depth, there would be no second chances. Then something shifted. The submarine tilted. A deep, unnatural pull dragged them down several feet, like a giant hand gripping them from below. The floor beneath their boots seemed to lurch. A few men stumbled, catching themselves against the walls. "That's not a current," Rodriguez whispered. Harper's voice was sharp. "Engines full reverse. Now." The order went out, and within seconds, the submarine roared to life, thrusters straining against the unseen force. The hull vibrated violently. The deep groaning of metal filled the air, a sound so primal it made Reynolds' blood run cold. Sudden, sharp release. The submarine shot upward, as if whatever had been holding it had let go all at once. Reynolds barely had time to register the movement before another force took over. Something much worse. The Megalodon wasn't letting them escape. Rodriguez's sonar screen flared red. "It's coming up fast. Brace!" Harper shouted. The impact was immediate. A deafening boom reverberated through the submarine as something massive collided with them. The vessel rocked violently, throwing men against walls, consoles, and the unforgiving steel floor. Sparks burst from electrical panels. The emergency lights flickered, casting eerie flashes across the chaos. Reynolds hit the ground hard, the air knocked from his lungs. His ears rang from the sheer force of the impact. He tried to push himself up, but another violent jolt sent him sprawling again. The Megalodon wasn't just attacking, it was hunting. Rodriguez gritted his teeth, his hands flying over the sonar controls. "It's circling back." Another hit like that and another impact. The submarine pitched sideways, throwing everyone into a heap against the far wall. Reynolds barely had time to grab onto a rail, his fingers burning as he held on. Wallace slammed against a console, blood streaking down his forehead from where he'd hit the edge. Harper pushed himself up, his voice raw with urgency. "We need to surface. Now." Wallace staggered to the controls, fighting against the flickering system readouts. Ballast dump engaging. The submarine lurched again, but this time it was rising. Reynolds held his breath, his heart hammering. The pressure in his ears changed as they rapidly ascended. But the Megalodon wasn't finished. Rodriguez's screen lit up one final time. "It's coming from below, full speed." Reynolds barely had time to register the words before the whole world seemed to explode. The explosion of sound ripped through the submarine like a shockwave. A gut-wrenching boom erupted as the Megalodon struck again, harder than before. Reynolds felt his body lift off the floor for a split second before slamming back down. The entire vessel shuddered, metal screaming under the strain. The emergency lights flickered wildly, casting long, shifting shadows against the chaos. Someone was shouting. Reynolds could barely hear it over the ringing in his ears. Then silence. Not a natural silence. An unnatural one. The ever-present hum of the submarine's engines was gone. Rodriguez looked up, his face pale. "We've lost propulsion." His voice was barely above a whisper. Harper's grip tightened on the railing. "Try restarting now." Wallace was already at the controls, hands flying across the panels. "Working on it," he muttered through gritted teeth. Sweat dripped down the side of his face, mixing with the blood from the gash on his forehead. Reynolds pushed himself up, his ribs aching with each breath. If we're dead in the water, we're sitting ducks. No one needed to be told that twice. Rodriguez stared at the sonar screen, his fingers tense over the controls. It's still there. The words sent a cold chill through Reynolds. How close? Rodriguez hesitated. It's not moving. Harper frowned. That's not possible. Rodriguez shook his head. I'm telling you, it's just sitting there right below us. No movement. Nothing. For a long, terrible moment no one spoke. The submarine rocked gently in the current, eerily quiet after the violent chaos from moments ago. Then something new happened. Sound. A deep, resonating sound, low and powerful. It rumbled through the submarine, vibrating through the walls, through their bones. It wasn't an impact. It wasn't mechanical. It was vocal. The Megalodon was making noise. Wallace's fingers hovered over the controls, his face pale. Did that thing just call out? Rodriguez adjusted the sonar, listening. The noise came again, low, drawn out like an ancient song from the deep. Reynolds' skin prickled. What the hell is it doing? Rodriguez swallowed. I think it's signaling. Harper's face darkened. Signaling what? The answer came too quickly. The sonar screen flared red. Rodriguez sucked in a breath. Multiple contacts, closing in fast. Reynolds' stomach dropped. It wasn't alone. The submarine, barely holding together, was now surrounded. The realization sent a wave of dread through the crew. One Megalodon had nearly torn them apart. What would more of them do? Harper didn't hesitate. Wallace, I don't care if you have to kick the damn thing. Get the engines back online. Wallace worked faster, his hands shaking slightly. Almost there, almost. Another sound rang through the water. Louder. Closer. Then, for the first time, the Megalodon moved. Rodriguez's voice was sharp. The big one, it's rising. Reynolds turned to the periscope, ignoring the pain in his ribs as he adjusted the focus. What he saw sent ice through his veins. The water directly beneath them was shifting, a dark mass rising toward the surface. But just beyond that, deeper, moving like shadows in the abyss, were others. Not one, not two, dozens. The ocean was alive with them. Reynolds' throat was dry. Sir. He could barely get the words out. We have a bigger problem. Harper turned sharply, his eyes locking onto the periscope. One look was all he needed. Wallace, get us the hell out of here. Wallace's fingers flew across the controls, sweat dripping down his face as he muttered under his breath. The submarine trembled under his touch, the battered systems groaning back to life in flickering bursts of power. Reynolds held onto the railing, his knuckles white. Tell me you've got something, Harper barked, his voice tight with urgency. Wallace exhaled sharply. Engines coming online. Just a few more seconds. Seconds they didn't have. Rodriguez's sonar screen flared again. They're closing in fast. His voice cracked slightly. The big one, it's leading them. Reynolds turned back to the periscope, his gut twisting. The water churned violently beneath them as the monstrous shape surged upward, bringing the others in its wake. It wasn't just hunting them anymore. This was something else. Coordinated attack. Harper didn't hesitate. Wallace, the second we've got power, full throttle. Get us out of here. The submarine jolted as the engines roared back to life. Wallace gritted his teeth. We're moving now. The vessel lurched forward, rising fast. The crew clung to whatever they could as the metal groaned under the strain. Rodriguez's sonar screamed with rapid pings. They're chasing us. There, his voice caught. Sir, the big one, it's coming right up beneath us. Reynolds' stomach clenched. If it hit them now, they wouldn't survive. Harper's voice was ice cold. Weapons system, anything left? Wallace barely looked up. Torpedo bay's dead. Only thing still online is... He hesitated. Harper's eyes narrowed. What? Wallace's jaw tightened. Emergency depth charge. One left. A silence fell over the bridge. Reynolds felt his pulse quicken. A depth charge at this range. It wouldn't just take out the Megalodon. Could cripple them too. Harper's expression didn't waver. Do it. Wallace hesitated only a second before slamming his hand down on the release. The charge deployed instantly, sinking fast. Rodriguez clenched his fists. Impact in 5-4. The ocean erupted. A massive shockwave tore through the water, slamming into the submarine like a fist. The vessel spun wildly, alarms blaring as they were tossed through the depths. Reynolds barely held on as sparks rained from the ceiling, the lights flickering violently. Then nothing. A stillness settled over them. The submarine groaned but held together. Rodriguez scrambled to the sonar. No movement. I think we got it. The tension in the air didn't break. Harper exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. Surface. Now. The submarine climbed fast, bursting through the waves moments later. The ocean stretched out around them, dark and endless. Reynolds felt his chest rise and fall in deep, ragged breaths. They were alive. Wallace leaned against the console, shaking his head. I can't believe it. Rodriguez hesitated, eyes still locked on the sonar. Harper frowned. What is it? Rodriguez swallowed hard. The others. His voice was barely above a whisper. They're still down there. A chill ran through Reynolds. The Megalodon was gone. But the ocean wasn't empty. Not even close. The submarine rocked gently on the surface of the water, the distant echoes of the explosion still fading beneath them. The crew was silent, exhausted and shaken. No one spoke for a long time. The only sound was the slow, rhythmic hum of the systems coming back online, a reminder that they were still here, that they had survived. Reynolds exhaled, his chest rising and falling heavily as he leaned against the console. His ribs ached, his muscles were sore, but none of that mattered. They were alive. Wallace let out a weak chuckle, rubbing his temple where dried blood still clung to his skin. I can't believe we made it. His voice was hoarse. Harper's gaze was locked on the horizon, his expression unreadable. He had been in the Navy long enough to see things men weren't meant to see, but this was something else entirely. He turned toward Rodriguez. Anything on sonar? Rodriguez hesitated, his fingers hovering over the screen. The big one is gone. His voice was quiet. But the others, they're still down there. Moving. Watching. A cold shiver ran through Reynolds. The Megalodon was dead, but its presence had stirred something in the deep, something that had been waiting unseen for who knows how long. Harper took a slow breath. Get a transmission out. HQ needs to know what happened. Wallace shook his head. Sir, with all due respect, what the hell do we even say? That question hung in the air. Rodriguez scoffed softly. You think they're gonna believe this? He tapped his sonar screen. That we went down there and got attacked by a prehistoric predator the size of a damn warship. That there are more of them. Harper didn't answer. He didn't need to. They all knew the truth. The higher-ups would bury this. The official report would say they encountered an underwater seismic event, or maybe a malfunction, a freak accident. Nothing more. Reynolds clenched his jaw. So what? We just pretend this never happened. Harper sighed. Doesn't matter what we say. They'll decide what gets told. His voice was calm, but there was something else in his eyes, something he wasn't saying. Wallace exhaled sharply, shaking his head. I don't know if I can just forget. Reynolds looked out toward the endless ocean, the vastness stretching before them like a living thing. I don't think we're supposed to. The water was still now, deceptively calm. But they all knew what lay beneath. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. If they're still down there, what happens next? Harper didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out over the waves, the fading light casting long shadows across the surface. Nothing, he said finally. Nothing happens next. And that was the truth of it. They had seen something they weren't meant to see. Faced something that wasn't supposed to exist. And now, the only thing left to do was leave. The engines roared to life, and the submarine slowly began its journey back to base. No one spoke as they moved through the open water, leaving behind the place where history had reached out and nearly swallowed them whole. Reynolds sat back, watching the horizon. The world looked the same, but he knew better now. The ocean was deeper, darker, and more alive than anyone could ever imagine. And somewhere down there, in the cold and silent abyss, they were still watching.